Jeb Callahan had lived alone for so long that silence had become a kind of companion. His cabin stood at the far end of the valley, a rough wooden structure built with his own hands, its boards weathered by wind and sun. He hunted enough to keep himself fed, repaired the simple tools that made his life manageable, and rarely crossed paths with anyone who wasn't passing through. People in town called him a quiet man, a rancher who asked for nothing and bothered no one. Jeb preferred it that way. A man who lived alone caused no trouble, and no trouble found him. Everything changed on a warm afternoon when he followed the creek downstream to check his traps. The water glimmered with the brightness of early summer, and the cottonwoods rustled with a lazy breeze. It was there, amid the silver splash of water against rocks, that he saw the two figures, small, frightened, and clearly injured. Two young Apache girls sat beside the creek, their faces streaked with dirt and fear. Their ponies had bolted, leaving them stranded miles from their people. One girl clutched her ankle, twisted badly enough that she couldn't stand. The other tried to help her but looked exhausted and bruised. They watched Jeb with wide, hesitant eyes, as though unsure whether he intended harm. Jeb froze for only a moment. He understood what it meant to find someone wounded and alone in the middle of nowhere, panic, pain, and fear woven together. Slowly, so they wouldn't startle, he held out empty hands and knelt in front of them. The girls spoke quietly in their own language, their voices trembling. They understood only a few words of English, but fear needs no translation. Without hesitation, Jeb lifted the girl with the injured ankle and carried her toward his cabin. The other followed close, limping but determined. Inside, he stoked his fire, crushed medicinal roots he'd learned to use from old trappers, and cleaned their wounds with care. One of the girls flinched when he touched the bruises on her shoulder, but when he murmured soothingly, she held still. He worked patiently, as if they were his own kin, giving them food, water, and a place to rest. They watched him the entire time, wary at first, then gradually relaxing as they realized he meant no harm. Jeb fixed the torn moccasin of one and wrapped the other's ankle in a tight, steady bandage. When their strength returned the next day, he helped them outside and pointed them toward the direction of their people. Before leaving, one girl stepped close and placed her hand over Jeb's heart, a gesture he did not understand but felt deeply. Then they disappeared into the trees, and the valley returned to its usual quiet. Jeb believed that was the end of the matter. 3 days passed before the earth itself seemed to tremble beneath his feet. A distant rumble rolled across the valley, steady and deliberate. Stepping onto his porch, Jeb saw the ridge darken as shapes appeared. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. An enormous Apache patrol crested the ridge, riders stretching across the horizon in flawless formation. Sunlight glinted off spearheads and the feathers braided into horses' manes. They rode not in chaos, but in disciplined silence, surrounding Jeb's cabin with the precision of a seasoned army. Jeb's hand drifted toward his pistol out of instinct, but he knew it meant nothing. If this was a punishment, he had no chance of surviving it. Still, he stood tall, refusing to show fear. A tall Apache chief dismounted and approached, wearing a bone necklace that signified high rank. His eyes held depth, power, and a kind of mournful wisdom. When he spoke, it was first in his own tongue, then in broken English. "The girls you helped," the chief said, "are nieces of a respected elder. Your kindness traveled faster than any scout." Jeb blinked, unsure he'd heard correctly. He had expected anger, not gratitude. The chief explained that in Apache tradition, protecting the young carried immense meaning. A man who aided their children, without seeking reward, without disrespect, was seen as honorable. That honor, he said, must be answered. All these riders come to show respect, the chief continued, sweeping his arm toward the vast formation around them. We repay what is given to us. Honor must be balanced. Jeb felt his throat tighten. Hundreds of warriors stood in still silence, not threatening, but acknowledging him. The moment felt larger than the valley, larger than his quiet life. It felt like something sacred. Then the chief spoke again, his expression darkening. "There is more," he said. "Scouts saw raiders near our borders. Men who attack lone ranchers, burn cabins, take what they want. We feared they would find you." The message was clear. They had not only come to honor him, they had come to protect him. Before Jeb could respond, a respected elder rode forward. His hair was silvered with age, his blanket patterned with symbols that told stories older than any settlement Jeb had known. A translator stepped beside him and spoke slowly so Jeb would understand. "Gratitude is not spoken," the translator said. "It is shown. These girls belong to a family of weight among our people. Their safe return brought joy and relief to many camps." The elder extended a carved wooden token marked with tribal symbols. It represented protection, a gift rarely given to outsiders. With solemnity, Jeb accepted the token and tucked it into his vest, feeling its weight as though it were a living thing. Then warriors dismounted and placed leather-wrapped bundles at Jeb's feet, dried meat, maize, furs, tools, and a finely crafted spear etched with patterns that spoke of guardianship. These were not gifts. They were promises. But suddenly, a sharp whistle echoed from the ridge. A scout raised his arm in warning. The chief's expression turned hard as stone. The raiders had come. Within seconds, the enormous Apache patrol shifted shape. Horses tightened into formation. Spears angled. Riders moved with a unity Jeb had never witnessed, silent, swift, unstoppable. Jeb stepped off his porch. "I'll stand with you," he said. The chief studied him for a long moment, then nodded. He placed Jeb near the rear line, where he could support without unnecessary risk. Moments later, figures burst from the tree line, men expecting an undefended ranch, not an army. The raiders faltered. Then the valley erupted. The Apache warriors moved like water around rocks, surrounding the raiders, cutting off escape, striking precisely. Jeb steadied his rifle and fired only when necessary, following the chief's shouted orders. Dust rose, hooves thundered, and the air trembled with the sheer force of coordinated movement. Within minutes, the threat was broken. The raiders scattered in terror, leaving behind their dead and wounded. The Apache riders did not celebrate. They simply returned to discipline, as though they had completed a solemn duty. The chief rode toward Jeb. "They will not return," he said. "Your kindness brought a shield to your door." Jeb had no words. As the patrol prepared to withdraw, the chief explained that watchers would remain in the distant hills, guards who would keep an eye on the valley, not to intrude on Jeb's solitude, but to protect him from future threats. Hundreds of riders began to move in waves, disappearing across the valley like a great tide returning to the ocean. Jeb stood alone, yet somehow not alone at all. He touched the carved token inside his vest and understood, with quiet awe, the depth of what had happened. He had acted from instinct, from decency, from a simple human urge to help two frightened children. But to the Apache, that act rippled outward like water in a still pool. They remembered kindness. They repaid loyalty. And they honored those who honored them. From that day forward, the valley felt different. Not empty, but watched over. Not lonely, but connected. Jeb resumed his quiet life, but carried a truth he would never forget. A small act of compassion had echoed far enough to gather an entire nation of warriors around one man, and bind him forever to their respect.